Grazie. I'm so sorry that my Italian is so poor. I would have liked to give this presentation in Italy, but I will be brief. You have heard a lot about our project, and I will give some concluding remarks. I will talk about why is it important to compare Nordic and Italian social workers. And I think the obvious reason is that we want to know if we are different or similar compared to colleagues in other countries. I think it's just so simple as that. And as my colleague Professor Anna Mevise said, if you look at hard facts, the social protection expenditure per capita and generosity and of welfare systems and poverty rates, it looks like that the Nordic countries and Italy, they differ quite a lot. We wanted to know, do also social workers differ a lot? Do they think in different ways and so on? Well, it's not, I don't have a, yep. It's not easy to answer the question, are we very similar or different, but I would say like this. There are differences between Nordic and Italian social workers on quite many questions. And, well, they support the idea that the welfare system we belong to influence how we think. But then I have very many objections to that we are very different. The differences between us and you are not very large. There are some 5, 10, 15% differences in how we think about different things, but that's not much. It also seems like that if we talk about social work practice, what is the vision and mission of social work? Should it strive for social change? Should it prevent social problems? Should it try to normalize difficult situations? On questions like that, we think quite similarly in all these countries we represent. We can also see that not even we from the Nordic countries, the social workers from the Nordic countries, do not always think in the same direction. When we looked at the data, it looked like the Italian and the Danish social workers were much more similar than the Finnish and the Danish social workers. So I mean, there are also differences within the Nordic countries, how social workers sometimes think and so on. And of course, at this point, we can't give you a good answer. Why is it so that we are quite similar when we think about social welfare policy and social problems, about clients, about autonomy and so on? But it looks like that. Is it so that we can talk about the social work ethos, similar values, regardless where we live? Or is it so that, as the moderator said here in the beginning, that the welfare models have been changing and perhaps they are also coming closer to each other? And could this be an explanation for that we have started perhaps, or at least now it seems that the differences are not so huge between attitudes in the Nordic countries and in Italy. I also wanted to point out that regardless that there are some differences between the countries, they are not that huge. But it's also important to remember that differences between social workers from different countries, that is not the only thing that is of some importance. We also found that there were gender differences within a country and also sometimes between countries. We found that there were in some countries, for example in Scandinavia, there were rather huge differences between social workers who were younger and those who were a bit older. This pattern we did not find in Italy, and I think it's quite interesting. Why do young Italian social workers have quite similar attitudes to a little bit older Italian social workers? I think it's amazing because in Finland we could see that the young generation of social workers, they have become very individualistic, and they believe that much of the social problems they are caused by the individual himself or herself. Poverty is the fault of the individual, not the unjust society and so on. So it's good to remember that within one country there are also some differences between gender groups, age groups, and so on. This is the second last PowerPoint presentation slide we have within this project. We wanted to say something about how we as Nordic researchers, what we see that the advantages of this study was from our point of view. You might have and should have perhaps other reflections. Of course, we thought it was interesting to see if there is a kind of value cohesion in the Nordic countries and also in other countries not belonging to the Nordic welfare model. It's good to know that if we meet social workers from other countries, do we speak the same language? Do we have the same vision, the mission, the goal? I mean, we have the International Federation of Social Workers, and they have a global definition of social work. Social work should strive for social change and social justice. And if it's so that social workers in different countries do not agree on these values, how does that affect cooperation? Or if social workers within one country are totally different opinions concerning the goals and missions of social work, what will the social work in that country then look like? And what we could see is that there is kind of social work, doxa or matrix, whatever you want to call it, and quite many, a majority of the social workers think a little bit in the same directions and have the same visions, but not all social workers. And I think it's one important learning from our project that even if the majority have the same visions and missions and values, there is also the majority who doesn't share perhaps exactly the same values. And that's the other point I was trying to write here on this slide, that from many reasons it might be challenging, it might be even problematic that we have some social workers, not just in Italy, but also in the Nordic countries, who have slightly different values, and that might affect how they treat clients, if they allow people to become clients, or how they interact with clients, and so on. And that's a challenge, I think, in not just in Italy, but in all countries, that if the value base of social workers is quite different, is it a problem or not? At least it should be discussed and perhaps problematized. And then the last slide, we wanted to give some examples how we have been using our study in the Nordic countries. Has it been of any use, or is it just that some university researchers have written their report and then that's it? And we wanted to show that, for example, one quite concrete outcome from the project was that we could identify that our young students and the young social workers, as I already said, they have quite individualistic values, and their knowledge about the mechanisms, the structural mechanism who might also lead to poverty, they were quite weak. So we have been discussing this at the universities in our countries, and we have discuss it with colleagues, and in quite many of the universities, at least in Finland, where we come from, have tried to get some new courses, for example, where the structural reasons behind poverty has been emphasized to a greater extent than before. I think it's important that the social work educations also act and react when they see that there are perhaps younger generations, some of them who have very weak knowledge about the mechanisms behind poverty. Another example is, I won't go into all of this example, but another example was that we could, by comparing the occupational health and stress in quite, on a macro level, quite similar Nordic countries, we could see that the social workers in Finland, they were very bad off. They had much higher levels of stress and burnout than in the other Nordic countries, and especially those social workers in Finland who worked within child welfare. About 76% of them had extremely high levels of stress, while the corresponding rate in the other Nordic countries was about 30%. So the levels, the differences were very, very big, and that we presented this for civil servants, for politicians, and so on, and some of our results was really taken into consideration when there was a new Finnish Child Welfare Act, and there was a recommendation that Finnish child welfare workers should not have too many clients. There was a minimum and maximum limit which was recommended, and so on. So I mean, I think that if you use the data in a proper way, you can make a change too. It's of course not always possible, but still. And then of course we also, after this Nordic study, we started another study where we compared social workers' attitudes with other welfare professional attitudes, those who work within the church, those who work with employment services and so on, and to see what kind of values do they have, these new professional groups. Because at least in the Nordic countries, social work is often multi-professional today, and it's good to have knowledge that what do social workers perhaps think, and what do the other professional groups you are working with, what do they think, and what do they value, and how do they see the problems, what are the causes behind problems, and so on. So these are just some examples what we have been thinking and doing with the Finnish material and study, and it's of course up to you to think that what reflections do you have when you look at the Italian results. Are they useful? How should you develop social work when you have taken now part of the results and so on? And it, of course, I think we all are very keen on hearing your reactions and actions, reactions at least concerning the results we have been presenting. Also, critical comments are very welcome. Researchers like critical comments. Well, once again, I think I would like to thank all of you for listening to us. I would like to thank the group for being invited here, especially Chairman Silvana Mordeglia, and then, of course, Professor Silvia Fagion for the comments, which were very useful. Thank you.